Who's your most improved player this year?
Connor McMichael.
Connor McMichael.
I don't know what they did down to him in Hershey.
He won a Calder Cup. That certainly helps. And a big goal for him in Game 7 of the Calder Cup final that brought him back from a 2-0 deficit, too.
He came back a different player. Confidence, swagger, skating fast, making plays. Just looked to me like a totally different player. So, and doubled his goal output. He didn't play a whole lot last year, but in his first year, 9 goals, 18 goals this year. He's headed in the right direction. He is going to be a middle six center in this organization for a long time.
I really am looking forward to in this series, and we touched on it a little bit before about what the young guys are able to do. And I'm going to go, again, a slightly different direction here, but I think you could go with either one of them. I'm going to go with Hendrix Lapierre just because I think back to November, he went back down to Hershey, and by the time that he came back really for the second half of the season, first of all, he went down to Hershey with a great attitude, and he was the best player in the Hershey lineup. He ended up playing half the season here in Washington, and in doing so, scored goals, moved pucks. Much like Connor McMichael, he's got a lot of speed that he is blessed with that he can use at this level, and I really thought that was going to be one of the things that was going to get Washington in the playoffs. You don't have a lot of guys with a lot of foot speed here. You also don't have a lot of young guys that got a lot of jam in game 80 and 81 and 82, and that's still going to be the case now here in the Stanley Cup playoffs, where you've played an entire season and now you're digging deep. Having these young guys contributing is going to be really important.
You're right, and you can't go wrong with either one of those guys in terms of your most improved. I mean, whether one is second and one is third line center, that's your middle six right there for a dozen years. I mean, those guys have not only taken that next step, they have shown that they are graduated. They don't need to go back to Hershey. They are NHL players now.
They are. No, there's no question. And as far as how that contributes to the best of 7 against the Rangers, we will find out with you. How about clutch performer? Let's do that. There have been some rather clutch performances for a team that had to rally from behind and find their way into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Who do you got?
I'm going to go with Dylan Strome.
I think that's a good choice.
I just feel like every time the game was on the line. Now, look, all apologies to John Carlson and Alex Ovechkin, who also scored some very big goals, especially down the stretch.
Especially John Carlson in the last couple of games.
2 game winners. But if you go back a little bit and you look at the times where things weren't going so well for the Capitals, who was the most consistent guy? Who was scoring those big goals when maybe they needed to snap a 3-game losing streak? Who was the guy scoring when they were even or behind a goal or in the third period and trying to mount a comeback? I felt like
overtime winners.
Overtime winners.
Yep.
Shootout winners. I just felt like Strome came through in the clutch time and again, so he's my guy.
It's very difficult to argue against Dylan Strome, and I would probably agree with that.
Well, then don't do it.
But I'm going to go with Alex Ovechkin because the second half of the season, the guy who I think everyone was saying, 8 goals going into that Dallas game at the end of January, has time passed him by? Is he not going to be able to do what he once did?
Everyone.
I mean, you had to wonder, right, at age 38, but it didn't happen that way, and all he did was become one of the best goal scorers again in the second half, proving once again that we should never doubt Alex Ovechkin ever, because anytime you do, he's going to stick it where, and he's going to show you exactly what he's all about. And that's how he ended up with 31 goals. And so many of them were big goals, power play goals, goals that would win games. I think back to the Western Canada trip where you didn't have, if you lost the first 2 games of that trip and you end up winning the next 3. Every time that there was a moment where this team started to falter, Alex Ovechkin was scoring goals around it. It's tough to pick against the captain. I'm going to go with Alex Ovechkin, the clutch performer, especially in the second half of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. And, he's got that C on his chest. That's a lot of weight. Everyone follows his lead. He's not a rah-rah guy. He never has been. He's not someone who goes in the room and speaks up all the time. When he does speak up, everyone sits up and listens. But he drags everyone into the fight by the way he plays, his physicality, those big goals that you mentioned there. Incredible captain. Everyone just kind of falls in line behind him. I remember when he was kind of first starting to find his groove, I felt like I'd asked John Carlson about Ovi, like maybe 2 or 3 post games in a row. And like after the third one, John just said, what more do you want me to say, Tarek? He's good, and we all fall in line when he's playing this way. It's enormous for our team.
Which brings us to most valuable player. And speaking of Alex Ovechkin, this is really been his domain for the better part of 2 decades. Yeah. But I think There is a unanimous choice on this, and for the first time in a long time, when the Capitals have been doing their thing and getting into the Stanley Cup playoffs, you'd usually say number 8, but I think we're both in agreement here that this time around we got somebody different.
Yeah, Charlie Lindgren, without a doubt. This team would not be where they are without him. I dropped the analytic earlier, steals. I mean, that is a number that is derived from goals saved above expected. If he saved more shots from high danger areas than the difference in the game, and they won the game, that's a steal. He had 7 of those. That was tied for 7th best in the league. That's worth 14 points. He's the reason they're here.
He is a guy that didn't play a lot in the first half and played almost entirely in the second half. Led the NHL, tied for the NHL, to be clear, in shutouts, which is not nothing when you did not get the bulk of the starts. 6 times this year he was able to come up with a shutout. And I really do feel, T, that this has become one of the big – we know how big a story this is here in our town. We are now starting to see this story being told nationally. And I think what you're going to see, especially if the Capitals go in and steal a game in New York, if they've managed to come home, say, even, and the whole hockey world is going to be saying, wait a minute, goal differential of -37. What are the Capitals doing here? And the answer is simply Charlie Lindgren.